Nintendo doesn't make as many new IPs as they used to in the past, but when they do, they're unique in their own ways. Some of the best Nintendo franchises are, of course, Mario, Legend of Zelda, and Pokemon. However, one of Nintendo's newest IPs has found itself in the searchlight time again and again. That game is Pikmin. Pikmin was created by Shigeru Miyamoto, the man behind Mario and other beloved Nintendo franchises. The idea of Pikmin and how it was thought of is amazing. Miyamoto was out on his patio and he noticed a line of ants carrying a leaf back to their nest. Miyamoto thought what that could look like as tiny people. And lo and behold, Pikmin became a reality. Pikmin is a beloved franchise with a huge and devoted fan base. The first entry in the franchise sold well, with the original release on the GameCube selling 1.60 million, and the new play controls on the Wii selling only 0.64 of a million, so overall selling over 2 million copies. I love Pikmin as a game franchise, and I think it is Nintendo's underrated and unappreciated franchise. So just like my playthrough series, I wanted to make an in-depth review and explain why I love this game. However, there will be a few things that are going to be different compared to my Pokemon Coliseum in-depth review. First, I will not be able to go into detail on how to get every single ship part to advance the game, since it would turn more into a walkthrough than a review. And second, it will be important to analyze the characters and enemies and why they are important in this game. So, with all that being said, let's start off with discussing the main character, Captain Olimar. Captain Olimar is only 0.75 of an inch tall. He's an employee of the Hakute Freight and the first one to discover the species of Pikmin. He also is the captain of his own ship called the SS Dolphin, a shout out to the GameCube's project name. I like Olimar. I like his design, I like his ship. He's kind of a goofball in his own way, but he isn't another certain Pikmin character who should not be named in this review. Pikmin starts off with Olimar piloting the SS Dolphin and gets hit by a meteor, and Olimar crashes on the Pikmin planet Kopai. With the Dolphin missing 30 of its ship parts, it's impossible for Olimar to get back home to his family, until he discovers these alien creatures called Pikmin. There are 3 different types of Pikmin in this game. The first one that Captain Olimar discovers is the red Pikmin. The red Pikmin are immune to fire and just the average Pikmin in a made-up stat sheet. The second kind of Pikmin that you discover very early on in this game is the yellow Pikmin. The yellow Pikmin are the most versatile type of Pikmin, and they can carry and use bombs that are found around the area. The last type of Pikmin is the blue Pikmin. They are the water breathers, and some could argue the toughest of the bunch. I am a huge fan of the blue Pikmin just due to the fact that my favorite color is blue. However, towards the end of the game, the blue Pikmin become a viable option over the red and yellow Pikmin. But it is fair to say each type of Pikmin is unique in their own way and are used to recover missing ship parts and even take out certain enemies. The Pikmin come from these small little ships that Olimar calls onions, since he eats a lot of them back at home. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of onions, but the name actually fits the shape and size of these ships. I also want to focus on the fact that the Pikmin are only 1 inch tall. They are taller than Olimar is. Let that sink in a little bit. Since the Pikmin follow Olimar around, Olimar is in charge of the Pikmin, which I know there is a little bit of controversy or even misbelief about Olimar and the Pikmin, but I'll get to that later. So with all of the character analysis out of the way, let's jump into the story. Olimar, after crashing into a meteor, wakes up at the impact site, the first location in this game. This is the area where he meets the red Pikmin. So far, Olimar can only gain access to one of his ship parts. The rest will have to wait later on in the game. Of course, this is the tutorial, so Olimar can throw the Pikmin, and the Pikmin can either attack enemies, or they get thrown at a ship part, or even a pellet, a circular type of object with a number on it. These items are the most important in this game, since having the Pikmin carry it back to their own onions, more Pikmin will spawn. Every single type of Pikmin will count, since you will need more than one to carry certain ship parts back to the ship. Some ship parts, like the engine, will take 20 Pikmin to carry back. Some ship parts might take more, and some might even take less. All the Pikmin count as one, so it doesn't matter which type you use. After getting the engine back to the ship, Olimar flies away above the planet's orbit, and to Olimar's surprise, the onion carrying the Pikmin follows suit. So, in Pikmin, you will have 30 days to get as much ship parts as you can. Some days you can get more than one. However, I do feel like if this is your first playthrough of Pikmin, you might not even get any on certain days. Also, this game has a day and night cycle. However, the days only last around 15ish minutes, so you will have a time limit on how many ship parts you can get in a day. I feel like this is a lot of time at the beginning of the game, but as you advance and find more locations that are more of a challenge, then it becomes quite chaotic. At the end of each day, Olimar writes a journal entry at the beginning of the game. It is a mixture of hopefulness that he will be reunited with his family, and even scientific evidence of the Pikmin creatures. Towards the end of the game, with fewer days left, his journal entries are filled with hopelessness and even a sense of dread to get all the ship parts that are needed. There are 3 endings in this game. The good ending is getting all 30 ship parts and defeating the final boss, Emperor Bullblax. The average ending is getting over 25 ship parts, but not all 30, and Olimar does escape back home, but no credits or even an enemy reel. The bad ending is getting less than 25, and Olimar crashes back into the planet, stranded. I have gotten to this ending the first time I played this game. The second location in this game is none other than the Force of Hope. This is the game's first open location, with many ship parts thrown around the area. Some parts, just like the impact site, will have to be obtained later on. The saying, alone we can do little, together we can do so much, is what Pikmin should be based around. In numerous situations, you will have to use many Pikmin to either defeat an enemy or even get through a weakened wall. Speaking of enemies, Pikmin has quite a few. Of course, the main enemy of the Pikmin is the Bulborbs. These white-spotted enemies eat Pikmin, but are actually easy to take out. Of course, if you can land the Pikmin on top of their eyes, and land a lot of them, they will get knocked down and eventually beaten up by the Pikmin. There are many different kinds of enemies in Pikmin. Some of them are easy to take out, and some of them are just plain annoying. All enemies, though, do have certain type of strategy to them. For example, Swooping Cinchbug is annoying due to them flying over your Pikmin, picking them up, and slamming them to the ground. It's kind of harsh how some of these Pikmin die. To defeat these type of enemies, Olimar will need to actively throw the Pikmin on top of these creatures, and the weight of the Pikmin will drive it down to the ground, defeating these creatures quite easily. Going back to how gruesome the Pikmin can die, they can get eaten by enemies, ran over by enemies, plucked from certain enemies from the ground, drowned, and of course, if you leave them behind, it is a full course meal for the Bulborbs that come out at night. Their screams become heartbreaking to listen to. Just like with pellets, downed enemies can be taken back to the onion to repopulate those type of Pikmin. As you get all the Pikmin to carry a pellet, an enemy, or even a ship part, they will carry that object quickly back instead of just using the number of Pikmin that are required. However, if you have more red Pikmin carrying back an enemy than the yellow Pikmin, well, the enemy's dead carcass is going to the red onion. So as your numbers get bigger or even smaller for your Pikmin army, you will have to make some decisions on which type of Pikmin will return back with that said object. Here at the Force of Hope, you will find the yellow onion, the home of the yellow Pikmin. Now you can bring back pellets and dead enemies back to the yellow onion, creating a different kind of Pikmin. With the yellow Pikmin, you can throw bombs at stone walls. However, you have to throw one yellow Pikmin at a time, because if you try and throw all bombs at the stone wall at once, you might run into the issue of losing a Pikmin or two. And that is one of the issues that Pikmin comes with. For a game that only gives you 15-ish minutes to complete each day, there are some situations where you have to take your time. This is to ensure that you do not lose any Pikmin along the way. Another example is actually here in the Force of Hope. There will be a time where you have to cross a narrow path with different types of Pikmin. There is water on both sides, so if you use the red or yellow Pikmin, they can fall in and drown. It becomes more of a frustration than it does strategy. Another frustration in this game is when you deselect a group of Pikmin and some of them literally slide over and can also fall into a pool of water. With that being said, they can also drown. And trust me, this can happen numerous times. With more ship parts, you will gain access to the next location, the Forest Navel. The Forest Navel is home to the blue onion, that is home to the blue Pikmin. With all 3 types of Pikmin, you can go after all the ship parts in all areas. This is where the game picks up and becomes one of the best Nintendo games. Many different ship parts placed in many locations where you have to strategize how to obtain them. Back at both the Impact Site and the Force of Hope, there are a few ship parts that require the blue Pikmin, since they are the only Pikmin that can swim in water. But back at the Force of Hope, with majority of the ship parts from that area obtained, you can go up against the first boss. To get to the first boss, all the Pikmin will need to be used. With Pikmin building stick bridges, yellow Pikmin using bombs to destroy stone walls, and using the red Pikmin on the first boss, the Armored Cannon Beetle. To defeat this boss, you will have to throw a Pikmin into its mouth as it's inhaling. This will stun it and open its wings up. With the wings opened up, throw a red Pikmin on its wings. This may take several tries, but it is an easy boss. With the boss being defeated, there is no reason to come back to the Force of Hope. The Armored Cannon Beetle is a pretty good boss design, a huge enemy with a great strategy to defeat it. I wish I could say that about the next boss in the Forest of Navel, but we will get there soon. In the Forest of Navel, there will be quite a few ship parts where you would need a lot of one type of Pikmin. However, the first time you arrive, it is always important to get a layout of the land and make sure to create many shortcuts to the ship. The Forest Navel is a dark and even creepy area with plenty of enemies. Some of them are well designed and need a certain type of Pikmin. For example, fiery blowhogs can kill yellow and blue Pikmin. However, since the red Pikmin are fire resistant, they can take the damage and easily defeat them. Each Pikmin has their type ability. Like I just mentioned, red Pikmin are fire resistant, yellow Pikmin can be thrown higher, and blue Pikmin can save other Pikmin while they are drowning. Honestly, the red and blue Pikmin are your go-to for the Forest of Navel when it comes to getting the ship parts, since there are ship parts in the water for blue Pikmin and ship parts past fiery hazards. The yellow Pikmin are only good for blowing up stone walls and finding shortcuts. Also, the boss fight here, Beady Long Legs. Beady Long Legs can only be fought with the yellow Pikmin, since they can be thrown at a higher elevation. However, you have to wait for Beady Long Legs' body to dip down a bit. When that happens, throw as much yellow Pikmin on it. This boss battle took me the whole 15-ish minutes. I hate this boss fight. It's just more annoying to wait for it to dip down, and your Pikmin can easily be killed since Long Legs covers a lot of range in its steps. With the last ship part from the Forest Navel, we can cover the Distant Spring, the most challenging area in this game. The Distant Spring takes everything that you learn about Pikmin and cranks up the difficulty. There are different ship parts that, of course, rely on one type of Pikmin. However, there are a few ship parts where you have to throw Pikmin at certain angles. If you miss the mark on some ship parts, then the Pikmin will just stand there and you will have to call them back. The programming in this game isn't the best, and the Distant Springs shows that. There have been numerous times where Pikmin that I threw either at enemies or at ship parts missed and they just stand there. Speaking of enemies, a lot of enemies here are just redesigns of enemies in areas before. They just take more time to knock out and are faster enemies, but they do give out more Pikmin sprouts. This is a good time to also explain the bulbs in the Pikmin's heads. They start off with a simple green leaf on their head, but if they are used often and even get sap, then they can get flower petals on their heads. This is making them more powerful to use and a force to be reckoned with. Another type of cool gimmick that is only found in the Distant Spring is the flowers on the ground that changes your Pikmin type. For one of the ship parts, you will have to use this to switch different Pikmin to different types. I wish they would have used this at the start of the game, since this would have gotten me out of sticky situations. With the Distant Spring completed and having 29 out of 30 ship parts in your possession, it is time to head to the final area, the final trial. The final trial is literally what it sounds like. All the knowledge of the Pikmin you have learned, you will use here. You will need to use each Pikmin type to get to the Emperor. This is an amazing moment in this game, using each Pikmin to get to the final boss, using each Pikmin's ability to their fullest. Emperor Bull Blocks is an easy boss, just time consuming. You would need only the yellow and red Pikmin. This is disappointing, since the area to get to the Emperor you had to use all Pikmin, but with the final boss you only need to use 2? Why? They could have added a part where the Emperor goes into the water and the blue Pikmin would have to go after him. This would have made it a better boss fight that create different types of phases. With the Emperor killed and the final ship part at the ship, Olimar and the different types of Pikmin, even ones we haven't seen yet, even to this day, all fly up in the ships away from the planet. Like I said earlier in this review, this is the good ending. I always recommend everyone getting this ending because it shows the game inside and out. However, you might think, why do I need to get all the ship parts when all of them are not a necessity? My counterpoint is, think of it like a bedroom. A bedroom has the necessities of a bed, wardrobe, light source, and 4 walls around it. Majority of the ship parts are necessities. However, some ship parts, like the space float, are just extra. Using my bedroom analogy, some extras in the bedroom could be a TV and its stand. It's supposed to make a bedroom unique, just like the space parts make the dolphin unique. Speaking of unique, we need to talk about the music. The music in this game is out of this world. Each location and every discovery has its own theme. The main title theme creates a sense of discovery and exploration. Just have a listen. Each type of area creates its own sense of aesthetic. The impact site creates a sense of mystery. The Force of Hope plays like it sounds, with hopefulness. The Forest of Navel is dark and scary, so the theme makes it dark and scary. Spring Distance is the only theme that does not fit the game of Pikmin. To me, it just sounds like noise that doesn't fit the Distant Springs. The Distant Springs is an area that looks peaceful, but really is not with all the enemies. Other type of themes in this game is the discovery of the Pikmin and the onions. However, there are some themes that will also put you at the edge of your seat, like the boss themes. The last type of mode I want to talk about is the challenge mode, where you try and grow as much Pikmin as possible. This might sound easy, but with enemies and obstacles, it is not. Honestly, I don't know why this mode is even in the game. It's okay at best, and there isn't any reason to play it. It's just a score/ranking system. There are no ship parts to find, so it's just doing a task over and over again. Going back to my original point of type of controversy or even a misbelief of how Olimar might abuse the Pikmin or be abusing the Pikmin, I view it that the Pikmin need Olimar to survive, and Olimar needs the Pikmin to survive and go back home. Yes, is Olimar using the Pikmin? Yeah, but I also feel like the Pikmin are also using Olimar, but in a way that's more relying. The Pikmin are relying for Olimar to be somewhat of their protector and to make sure that he protects them. And of course, the argument is, well, Olimar lets the Pikmin die and makes them do what he wants them to do. Olimar doesn't make the Pikmin die. We as the player make the Pikmin die with either bad choices or even not relying on how mediocre the programming in this game is. Overall, Pikmin has some rough spots, but do those rough spots make it a bad game? No, far from it. This game is just the stepping stone for what will become something bigger and better. I love Pikmin as a franchise. It's strategic, beautiful, and fun to play. It's literally a game that takes the saying, little things make big things happen. Wait, what's happening? Wow, thank you so much for watching this review. There will be more in-depth reviews. I wish I could say what kind of games I'm going to be giving my in-depth review treatment for, but I kind of want to keep you all in suspense and keep those a surprise. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. Make sure you like, comment, smash that bell, subscribe to the channel, all that kind of good stuff, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, take care.